All right, folks, good evening. We're going to get started. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 28th, 2026 meeting of the City of Worcester Planning Board. My name is Albert LaValle. I'll chair tonight's meeting. Before we begin, a couple of brief announcements concerning how our meeting will proceed tonight. First, all our meetings are in a hybrid format. You can participate either in person at City Hall or by going online to worcesterma.zoomgov.com/J/1617314979. And just to cable services, or maybe Rose, I think there's an echo somewhere. I think it's the TV. To manage remote participation during our hybrid meetings and prevent disruptions, all participants are automatically blocked from unmuting themselves, turning on their video, or sending chat messages. For remote participants who would like to comment on an item on our agenda, we ask that you use the raise your hand feature in Zoom during the discussion on that item. If you're joined by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. Staff will then call on members of the public one at a time and give them permission to unmute themselves. You can do that either through the Zoom app or if you're joined by phone by pressing *6. Next, I note this is a public meeting, which means it is both being broadcast and recorded. Hi. That's interesting. It sounds weird up here too. Rose, do we have maybe cable services could give us a hand?
Cable services, would it be possible to up the volume a little bit? We were getting some feedback from the TV, but I think it should be okay now.
Is this any better? Oh, okay. I can try this one. All right, play a little musical microphones then. So what I was saying is this is a hybrid meeting. I discussed how you could sign in online, which hopefully isn't relevant to the folks that are here in the room who are having trouble hearing me. Next thing I would note is this is a public meeting. It is both being broadcast and recorded. Minutes will also be published at a later date. To help with that process, we ask all speakers participating in person to use a microphone and to please clearly identify yourself each time you speak. And the first time you speak, please also state your city or town of residence for the record. To help maintain an orderly meeting, please address all comments and questions through the chair, that's me, rather than directly to any of the other speakers or applicants. There are a couple items on our agenda tonight that are going to be continued or postponed. I'm going to read through those shortly. If you're here on one of those items, please note no additional notice will be sent to you prior to the next meeting. The best thing to do is to call the planning department either the day of or the day prior to the next meeting to confirm if that item will be heard or postponed that night. It is not uncommon for items to be postponed multiple times before they're heard by this board. Once an item is called, there'll be a brief presentation of that item by the applicant, followed by any additional comments and clarifications from members of the city staff, then an opportunity for anyone from the public who wishes to speak on that item. What we typically do is ask folks in the room to speak first, and then we go to online once everybody here has had an opportunity. And then once that's done, we'll go to board discussion and action. Lastly, all applicants should be aware that approvals are generally conditional. Decisions are generally signed by the board at the next meeting and where appropriate filed with the city clerk the following day, which is what begins any appeals periods. Decisions are typically not released to the applicant until all conditions of approval have been satisfactorily addressed. It is the applicant's responsibility to address conditions of approval, and a lack of doing so can result in delays or enforcement. Applicants with questions are asked to please call the planning division about that. Okay, moving into continuances. There are two tonight. Item number 1, 0 Chester Street, a definitive site plan. The request is to continue the public meeting to February 18, 2026 and extend the constructive grant deadline to March 12, 2026. And item number 2, 149 Malden Street and 0 Morgan Street, a definitive site plan and definitive subdivision plan. Request to continue the public meeting to February 18, 26 and extend the constructive grant deadline to March 12, 26.
Motion to continue item 1 and postpone item 2.
Second.
On the motion, Mr. McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Delera?
Yes.
Mr. Toomey?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. That motion passes 5-0. Moving into our regular agenda, we have one item of new business tonight. Just before I call this item, I have a couple comments for folks that are here who I think are probably interested in it that might be helpful. First thing to know tonight is that this is a preliminary subdivision plan. So something to know about preliminary subdivisions. They're required for non-residential subdivisions. It's the first step in a two-step process. And they're elective for residential subdivisions. The purpose is to afford an applicant an opportunity to get comments from the planning board, from members of the city staff, from other interested parties, perhaps you all, before they advance their plans to a further stage and come back for what's known as definitive subdivision, a definitive subdivision plan, which is the actual act that gives them permission to create the subdivision. Next thing to know, a subdivision is not a site plan, so our primary concern in reviewing a subdivision is in deciding whether or not, this board's primary decision is deciding whether or not it complies with the city's ordinances related to subdivisions and whether or not any waivers of those ordinances are appropriate given the individual particulars of that subdivision. What that really means is, it's not uncommon for residential subdivisions to show example, houses that they're planning to build on these lots, but that's actually not what we care about at this stage. If appropriate, they eventually have to come back for a site plan to get those particulars of the house lots approved. So just to review, tonight we are here to provide commentary. We can either, as a board, we'll have the opportunity to either approve or deny this preliminary subdivision plan. That action has virtually no meaning. This is really just an opportunity for the developer to come and interact with city staff, get city staff comments, interact with this board, get our comments, get an understanding of what we might or might not approve, and also engage with members of the public to get your comments as well. I do know that there are a number of people who have reached out with written comments. I see a number of people in this room, more than usual, who I presume are here on this item. Our request tonight would be, we want you all to have the opportunity to speak. We're delighted that you're here. Let's try to be efficient about it. So, if somebody's already made all the points that you want to make, maybe don't make those points. If you got different ones, that's fine. But let's kind of move through in an orderly process. We don't typically limit the amount of time you have to speak, but if it's going on and on, we will ask you to yield the floor to someone else. So, with that said, let's call the item. The only item we're going to hear in new business tonight is item number 30274 in 300 Salisbury Street. This will be a public meeting for a preliminary subdivision plan. I believe you're the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Sam Forg. I'm representing Expedited Engineering and also the Salisbury Hills development for the subdivision at 300 Salisbury Street.
Excuse me. Could you please speak up with the mic close to your mouth?
Is this better here? Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. So I guess before starting off, I want to echo the sentiment that the chairman said as well. I pushed for this process ultimately for the understanding that this was probably going to be a sensitive project and to basically make people aware that this is the development that we're putting forward is something that, is intended by Salisbury Hill, and obviously wanted to seek out for commentary, consideration, and, understand exactly what the board may or may not approve relative to waivers and other things as well. So appreciate everybody coming out for this, and I guess I'll move forward. So as you see on the screen, there are 18 new lots as part of the subdivision. Lot 1R, which is the existing mansion at the top of the hill, is not part of this, though there is an access easement currently through the property right now that has been granted, and that will have to be realigned along the top of the cul-de-sac. So this is the survey here, again, showing that access easement through. Just talking through the existing conditions, I'm sure everybody's well aware of them, but ultimately the grade slopes pretty steeply from the northwest to the southeast. There's an existing collection area to the east of the access drive. That is basically a collection area for stormwater currently that has no controls. If that were to overflow, it ultimately does overflow into Salisbury Street right now. So part of some of the stormwater concerns and things like that that have been brought forth, part of what we will ultimately do as part of definitive subdivision and definitive subdivision planning through this board, we'll have to address those stormwater concerns. As part of this too, this is just the existing additions and demolition plan. There is a considerable amount of mature vegetation that will obviously have to come down as part of this. Through the preliminary plan, we do not have any sort of landscape plan at this point. The intention is for that to be part of the definitive filings in the future. This, understanding that this has a lot of residents abutting, one of the things that was brought forth by planning was consideration of construction sequencing. And so what you see on screen right now is ultimately like a stage one of what the construction may look like. They wanted to make sure that there was still going to be access up to the mansion at the top of the hill. We have provided that temporary access, and the intention for what would ultimately happen in terms of construction would be along the northern edge first and construction of the cul-de-sac, and ultimately the access that gets up to there, which would be the permanent access to the mansion. And then ultimately from there, construction could happen on the southern portions and the western portions of the site. This is the layout as it is currently shown. We do have a new road. It is a dead-end street. One of the waivers that we have put forth as a potential was an increased length of the road. I want to stress too that this does not mean that we're getting more lots out of this by having that extension. There are other ways of configuring such that we would have enough lots even if it were to be pulled back as well. The reason for having it was just simply trying to get grading up to a certain point, a certain elevation. Again, as you are well aware, from Forest Street up to where that mansion is, I think it's roughly 50 to 60 feet of vertical change.
Sorry, but I'm not understanding the map. And you're going too fast,
Okay.
and I don't know what roads you're indicating to, so if you could go there and please indicate what you're talking about.
Sure.
Ma'am, I appreciate the question. You're not supposed to do that, and I'd ask you not to. Just if anyone from the public does have questions, as I'm sure you will, let's let the applicant present their plan, and then let's ask to clarify afterwards. Just because we keep minutes, people are participating online, they can't hear you. I do understand, ma'am, and I'm sorry, but this is a public meeting, and it's not just folks in this room who are participating. You're not speaking into a microphone, it's not your turn to speak. That's all a little problematic. Go ahead.
Thank you. So moving forward, again, there are 18 new lots created as part of this subdivision. Centrally located is a stormwater basin. Again, going back into the waivers, the extension of the road will not mean that we're getting more lots out of this. We had interpreted the subdivision rules to state that it was the length of road would be to the center of the cul-de-sac, which is why we didn't change it at this point until hearing from you guys about the anticipated waivers. Having two sidewalks on the street, I understand is the city's standard. What we're proposing is just for the section where the stormwater basin is, for it to just be a single side of sidewalk. There would be continuation of sidewalk and connectivity for pedestrians through a crosswalk down on like the lower level closer to Forest Street. And then as far as the reduced width of the road, it's just trying to reduce the amount of impervious area. A 24-foot road is a fairly common road for, this amount of traffic. The road would essentially only be used by those that are residing within the properties. So reducing that width is just a matter of just trying to get the impervious areas down. The other thing of note on here is that we will have to seek a special permit for the common driveway. I did want to understand the board's position on the common driveway because we can, as you see right now, we have 3 lots that are connected into Salisbury Street. Each of those gains frontage. Each of the 3 lots off of the common driveway gets frontage off of Salisbury Street as well. So whether or not you'd be amenable to having those 3 lots onto Salisbury Street is kind of a direction that we would like to see from you guys as well. And that would ultimately not result in a special permit necessary. Next. This is just a dimensional plan. It shows that we're meeting the setbacks required for each of the lots. The RS10 zone has a minimum size requirement of 10,000 square feet. I know that some of them are really close, as noted in some of the comment letters, but this is ultimately what the zoning bylaws allow, and that's what has been put forth by the developers for their intentions at the site. Another comment that was received is just in terms of the representative photos that were provided. These are by no means any sort of architectural plans at all. The developer has not sought out for architectural design at this point. All we were trying to highlight are that we're trying to work with the grade as much as possible to have walkout basements and also tuck under garages, similar to what you would find on Otsego Street at the top of the street as well. In terms of grading, again, I guess the highlight of it is the new road. We come off of Forest Street at about a 2% grade, ultimately ramping into a 5%, and through the stormwater basin about an 8% grade. At the cul-de-sac, it's a 3% grade, which is the maximum allowed as part of the subdivision rules. And I think that's about it of note on this page. As far as the utility plan, again, this is baked at about 60% at this point. We have coordinated with DPW. We've received their comments. I've spoken with folks in the water department as well. Honing in on what the standardized details are for the city is going to be happening as part of the definitive filings. So again, this is more a representation of ultimately what's to come, but not by any means like the final plan at this point. This is just getting back into the road grading. So yeah, and I think honestly, I'll probably stop at this point to allow for commentary from the board and ultimately from the public.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Turn it over to Ms. Russell from Planning for staff comments.
Thank you. My name's Rose Russell. I'm a planner in the Worcester Planning and Regulatory Services Division. Sorry about that. I'm just going to give a brief overview of this project, talk a little bit more about a preliminary subdivision filing and what the board is evaluating tonight. So the application before you is a preliminary subdivision application for 300 Salisbury Street for construction of a 556 road terminating in a cul-de-sac. The intent of the subdivision is to construct 17 single-family homes. The subdivision is ultimately an 18-lot subdivision, and that last lot is going to be 274 Salisbury Street, the existing house at the corner of Forest and Salisbury Street to remain. So it's a 17 new homes, 18-lot subdivision, and then as stated, Lot 1R is the mansion at the top of the hill. That property is wholly out of this scope of the subdivision. It's owned by a separate property owner, so we just want to make that really clear that that property is not included here tonight. So as the board chair discussed a little bit, preliminary subdivisions are elective. The applicant's choosing to do this to benefit from staff feedback, board feedback, public comments, and participation in the process. So tonight, the board's really evaluating whether or not they would grant the waivers for a subdivision. And so subdivisions, we're evaluating the roadway and the lots to be created. The houses themselves are not really what's being evaluated at this stage, and those would be later reviewed during a site plan review process. Site plan review is required for all lots within a subdivision, so that would happen later, along with a definitive subdivision plan, which is required, and all folks that receive notice of this hearing would receive notice of any future hearing of a definitive filing, of a definitive site plan, or of a special permit. So what the board's considering tonight is the cul-de-sac, so that ends in 556 feet. As the applicant stated when they first applied, they had measured the length of the cul-de-sac to the center of the island. Staff, later on, we reviewed, confirmed with DPW, and the way that the subdivision regulations read is that we measure the length of the dead-end road or the cul-de-sac to the very end, rather than in the center of the island. So that wasn't a waiver the applicant was originally seeking, but subsequently through staff review, we identified that it is just about 56 feet over that maximum length. So there's a couple waivers the board is evaluating tonight, one of those being the dead-end length. The other waivers the board is evaluating tonight is sidewalks on both sides of the street. It's a little bit difficult to see in this plan, but on lot 8R, it's this large one in the middle. It's where the detention system is proposed for the roadway. That is a very steep section where the applicant's not proposing sidewalks, so they're seeking relief from that requirement. And then the final waiver they're seeking tonight is from the minimum roadway pavement width. So the city requires a 30-foot width, and the applicant's proposing a 24-foot roadway width. So those are the things the board's evaluating tonight. We have a lot of recommendations. We've listed in our memo. We did receive comments from the Department of Transportation and Mobility, DPW, Water, and Engineering divisions. Some folks we have online with us tonight. But I do just want to highlight, we received some preliminary comments from the fire department, and ultimately staff is reviewing this project at a preliminary level, so there may be things that we aren't able to identify at this stage, given that the plans are preliminary and that a lot of the more in-depth proposals have not been prepared at this time. So things like a fire truck turning plan, a cut and fill plan, some more detailed erosion control and stormwater plans, those haven't been provided, so staff's not able to review and comment on those to the extent we would when folks come in for a definitive plan. So I just want to make that clear. Some comments we did receive from the Department of Public Works, we just want to highlight in regard to the stormwater basin. We just ask that the applicant work with both the Department of Public Works and Transportation to evaluate these things prior to filing a definitive plan, and come back with these issues resolved. Some of the comments we make in our memo is in regard to this temporary turnaround. So the board is really evaluating the road as it leads up to the cul-de-sac. Past the cul-de-sac, there's about a 250-foot common driveway. This is only allowed via a grant of a special permit through the planning board. So any common driveways that serve 3 or more lots require approval by the planning board. And as you can see, it stretches from the cul-de-sac down and it serves those 4 homes. So that would be permitted separately, and that is not part of the public road that the applicant's proposing to lay out through the subdivision, although it's ultimately connected. And as part of that, we do just want to make note that this is a very large parcel in the city. It's about 8.5 acres. The applicant has over 1,000 feet of frontage along Salisbury Street and about 211 feet of frontage along Forest Street. So the applicant does have other alternative options where they could permit development on the site by right. So there's a number of lots that could be developed that have adequate frontage, that have adequate lot area in this RS10 zoning district, which is the most restrictive residential zone we have in the city. And because that access exists along a public road, they would be A&R lots. So as long as they meet zoning, they'd be able to be developed by right. What we're seeing tonight is the applicant coming in to lay out a subdivision because of a lot of the steep grades that exist on the site, especially along Salisbury Street, right at the corner. I can't see the road on the other side. I think it's Beachmont. Right at that corner, it's very steep, so the applicant is proposing to site the houses almost on the top of the hill, and along a number of them, they're proposing to use the houses as grading, so they're doing the drive-under garages along a lot of the subdivision, but we just encourage them to continue evaluating the architectural styles where they can further limit development and maintain some of the existing forests, some of the existing features that we'd like to see retained to the extent possible. But it's really some of that steep grading along the street that's causing them to not want to develop homes that lead right out onto Salisbury Street. All right, so I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Any additional comments from members of the city staff? All right, hearing none, we'll open it up to public comment. The way to do this is just come on up one by one, use a microphone. It needs to be green. There's a little button to push if it's not. And then just state your name, city or town of residence, and let us know what you think. One and then two, if that works.
I'm Frank Callahan, and I live at 53 Elm Street near downtown, but I grew up near Butternut Hill, where the proposed subdivision is located. As a follow-up to my letter of opposition to the planning board, I have the following information. The traffic at the intersection of Salisbury and Forest is often busy, and I've heard several anecdotes on how dangerous the streets are there. In fact, few people choose to walk on the narrow sidewalk on Salisbury opposite the site, as they fear of the closeness of the oncoming traffic could be very dangerous to them. It is in this dangerous stretch that the subdivision proposal asks for 3 driveways on Salisbury Street, with 2 of them at the sharp bend at Beachmont, which is a blind spot for oncoming cars. I feel that cars entering and exiting driveways here would be very dangerous. In addition, that stretch of Salisbury Street is a steep embankment, and so a lot of earth would have to be moved to construct the 3 driveways. The construction of these driveways would be very disruptive both to the drivers and to the neighbors. Though the Cow Tavern is owned by the developer, it's my understanding the restoration of that structure is being handled separately from the subdivision proposal. And so I hope the developer works closely with Preservation Worcester in protecting what is one of the 2 historic taverns here in the city of Worcester. Also concerning is that the proposal calls for a new driveway for the Cow Tavern, and it's very, very close to the dangerous intersection. About a decade ago, the parents of the subdivision developer donated their more than 7,000 square foot home to the Chabad Lubavitch. Unfortunately, this community has been unable to maintain the house, and over time it has become derelict. And the neighbors have many anecdotes about the problems with this empty house. I talked to one gentleman, he said he drove up the driveway, the front door was wide open. And then I talked to somebody else, and they said the reason the door is wide open is because of mold and mildew. So it's in very poor condition. Though the mansion is now separated from the proposed development, the driveway to the mansion is on Salisbury Street and is owned by the developer, not the Chabad. Under the subdivision proposal, that driveway would be removed for the construction of the proposed houses on Salisbury Street. The subdivision proposal instead calls for the access to the mansion to be on the proposed common driveway at Forest Street. However, the proposed common driveway is longer than the 5 feet, which exceeds the city's regulation for such a development. As a result, the road would be shorter there, and there'd be no access to the mansion. In addition, it is my understanding there is a limit of 6 houses for a common driveway in the city's regulations, and by my calculations, there are 14 houses on the proposed subdivision. Also, it is my understanding that any development over 5 houses must have an affordable housing component, but I have not found that provision in the proposal. In conclusion, while the subdivision proposes housing, the new road and driveways would further increase the dangerous traffic problem at this key intersection and easily outweighs the need for new housing in Worcester. In addition, more and more housing is being built at the far end of Salisbury Street. For instance, Salisbury Hills keeps expanding with more units being added all the time presently, and there's the potential for 80 more units there. Next door to Salisbury Hills is the Arbella at Bramble Hill development with hundreds of planned units to be built. These will only add to the already considerable traffic at the intersection of Salisbury and Forest Street. Thank you very much for your time.
Just one item to note, in case anybody was curious about it, the affordable housing provision, it's 12 or more units, and they don't have to tell us yet. They have to tell us before the definitive site plan whether they're going to have one of these units, it would be one, be restricted to affordable or to do the payment in lieu, which is 3% of total construction cost. Just so everybody knows.
Hi, my name is Ida Filiberti, and I'm a resident of Worcester. And I will echo a lot of what Frank Callahan said. 14 houses exiting onto Forest Street, very near to the intersection, seems like a very dangerous thing. And the 3 curb cuts, the 3 driveways on that curvy section of Salisbury Street. Most of us are aware that Worcester has made attempts to make the streets a safer place for pedestrians and cyclists. I was really encouraged by Worcester's participation in Vision Zero. I applaud the attempts at improving crosswalks and cycling lanes with paint and better signs. However, we're a long way from having safe sidewalks and bike lanes or even adequate-sized shoulders along many stretches of our roads. Saying you want to achieve a more pedestrian and cycling-friendly city requires matching development with appropriate infrastructure. In this situation, we have a main road, 2 main roads, Salisbury Street and Forest Street, that are already overburdened with car traffic. The approval in recent years of many large developments just north of this area without any road or sidewalk infrastructure improvement has made the situation go from bad to worse. It used to be unpleasant, but now it's more dangerous as well. There is a sidewalk currently only on one side of Salisbury Street, and it's very narrow, so walking on it is really not safe. The fact that the road is curving and narrow makes it even worse. While I have given up altogether walking on this stretch because it's too dangerous, what I can't give up is cycling on this road. It's the main road heading north toward Holden. In fact, I know many cyclists who ride, as I do, around the Holden reservoirs and loop back around into Worcester by this route. While we have never felt completely safe, the degree of concern has steadily risen as development has gone unchecked along Salisbury Street. I would also remind you that Salisbury Street is designated by Worcester as a bike route. Anyone who rides a bike will tell you that one of the most dangerous times for a cyclist is not riding with the traffic, it's coming to a driveway or a cross street where a car might be turning in or pulling out. Cars have a tendency to come out as far as the driver needs in order to see in both directions. The larger the vehicle, the farther out they come in order to see over the front of their car. This almost always results in the vehicle crossing the sidewalk if there is one, or crossing into the shoulder space where a cyclist or a pedestrian would be. Cars, sadly, are almost never looking for a pedestrian or a cyclist unless there are clear crosswalks or some other visible attention-getting sign. In addition, there is an ever-increasing number of vehicles associated with every new house that is built. We all see them. They are ubiquitous. UPS, FedEx, Amazon, just to name a few, and they're almost always stopped along the streets beside a driveway, just another obstacle for pedestrians and cyclists to go around. I saw in the proposed plans that there would be at least 3 new curb cuts for driveways along Salisbury Street, with the rest exiting and entering onto Forest, adding to this already congested section. I did not see anything in the plans for widening the road to increase the shoulder space for cyclists or adding sidewalks or in any way addressing the issue of matching development with Vision Zero's goal of making our roads safer and more user-friendly. I would hope that the city does not approve this plan in its current design, as it seems to me like zero vision.
Who'd like to go next?
Good evening, Martin Richmond from Worcester. I'm a direct abutter on Butternut Hill. I wonder if we could go, if it's possible, to the earthwork plan. So I want to just, I want to acknowledge my friends that have spoken already, and a number of things that I would certainly agree on. I wanted to maybe make 2 points. One is when I look at this plan, we're actually on the corner, the top of this plan on Butternut Hill. What I see is a change of character of this landscape and the significant change of old growth in the area. And it looks like, I don't know what the percentage would be, but probably 80 or 85, 90% of the growth being cut down and eliminated. So I would, from a perspective of a homeowner in that area, look for an alternative. I think a landscape plan for a definitive plan is really important in this regard. The other is I heard the applicant refer to the extension and the possibility of moving some of those homes perhaps to Salisbury Street, and I would really encourage the planning board to think differently on that. I think, as has been commented, acknowledging their right to build, any extensions of driveways into that area would be very dangerous. That is, we live on Butternut. The bottom of Butternut is really a blind drive on both sides, and the traffic goes really, really fast. So I'm uncomfortable with 2 additional, outlets onto Salisbury Street. I would be really scared to have more. The landscape on this property is a challenge to the building. We know, there's a specific house they built into a hill where they can't hardly get into their garage the way that they had to build, that driveway. So I think there are certainly some challenges. Perhaps they can be addressed. But these are the 2 things that I worry about most, the earthwork here and the driveways onto Salisbury.
Okay, thank you. Come on up. Just one thing I wanted to say in response, because I know this gets talked about a lot, and Ms. Russell covered this, but I wanted to make sure folks understood. So this is a definitive subdivision because of the road, not because of the number of houses. So what's causing them to come and have to get approved at all before any board in the city of Worcester is the fact that they're putting a road in. If they wanted to do what they can do just as of right, I've seen some plans that have been approved over the years or drawn up. They could put a number of driveways, get the same number of houses on this land, result in the same amount of clearing, but put all those driveways out onto Salisbury Street. And to Ms. Filiberti's point, I'm also a cyclist. That used to be on my running route as well. I know how dangerous that section of street is. I don't think you folks want that. I don't think the developer wants that. So the point I want to make to you is I've been on this board for 8 years now. I'm just a citizen. I don't work for the city. I've seen a number of projects come before this board where opposition forms to the project that the end result is the developer chooses to do what they can do as of right, which is a worse development for the neighborhood. So when we're sitting up here, what we're trying to do is navigate that very narrow stretch of, yes, this is going to be a major change to the character of the neighborhood. They could do most of that change as of right. It would be worse for everybody involved. This is probably better. Let's try to make it as much better as we possibly can. That's my perspective. You're welcome to your own, and we're delighted to hear it. So I'll stop talking. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Laura Lennis. I live on 35 at Seago Road. I made a petition, and it goes as follows. We, the undersigned, are in opposition to the development of the proposed subdivision for 17 houses at 274 and 300 Salisbury Street, Worcester, Mass. 01609. We believe it will have an adverse effect on traffic patterns, historic landmark buildings, natural animal habitat, flooding created by destruction of woodlands, antiquated city infrastructure such as water pipes, quality of life for surrounding neighborhood, potential damage to abutters' properties from excavations, slope stability issues, and potential blastings. I sent it out to about 7 people, and we got 127 signatures opposing this. Some of the commentary was a number of concerns, traffic in particular, absolutely opposed this entire project. The electric service would be maxed. City infrastructure is not sufficient for additional densification of this neighborhood. Concerned about the interruption of lives, pollution, noise, heavy traffic, noisy trucks, deforestation, etc. Also, on a personal note, as you can see, I'm on oxygen, and I'm severely worried about the air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up, sir.
Hi, my name's Brian McShay. I live on Forest Street, and pretty much agree with everything they've all said. I just wanted to add a couple things, especially after hearing about the 24-foot road. That, to me, seems like if you had weather like we had today, and the snowbanks are there and everything else, and you hit, let's say it's a Saturday night, you get neighbor A is having a big party and a lot of friends are coming over. Parking on a 24-foot road with cars on both sides, even one side, is going to be very restrictive. I'd be concerned about fire department, police, and such other ambulance getting up that area. Also, the electrical grid, like you just mentioned, I live on Forest, and somebody developed the house behind me. They had to go through a nightmare just to get electricity to one house. I know they had a bank off another area. It wasn't even the Forest Street area. We've had a lot more brownouts in the area and blackouts. I remember the first 5 or 6 years I was in the area, not one blackout. And I talked to other neighbors that have been there for 15, 20 years, 30 years, maybe 1 or 2 over that span. We've had probably about 7 or 8 where we lost power for like half a day, and it's not always based on the weather, a lot of people think, so. Also, the 20-foot road, the electrical, one more thing. Little joke here. Took me 32 minutes to get here tonight. How long would it have taken otherwise with this group? Again, the traffic, everybody can attest to this. The traffic coming here tonight was an absolute nightmare everywhere we went. That's again because we have snowbanks everywhere. We have, they're extending out, and again, that takes into the road itself. Imagine if this guy did go, and by the way, I don't think he's going to go with the worst development because that's going to cost him more. Not a builder in the world I ever heard of builds anything based on costing more. He's going with the best cost for him. If he did put those houses in you're talking about, with 15 driveways or whatever, can you imagine the snowbanks on Forest Street and on Salisbury Street? What a nightmare, absolute nightmare. So again, thank you for the time. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
I'm Sarah Lennis. I live up at 35 Otsego Road. That was my daughter that you just spoke to. We live a mile, mile and 1.9 miles from this area that we're talking about. And nobody knows, but we have a wildlife corridor in Worcester, 1.9 miles from here. And I know that because my house is embedded into the top of Otsego Road. From my second floor, I see into my woods. We've put a trail cam up there, and it's amazing what is happening right here. And I know planning doesn't really have anything to do with it, but we have a herd of deer. We have flocks of turkeys, foxes, red and gray, Fisher cats, we have a bobcat, he's been recently seen, coyotes, a coyote couple, possums, raccoons, groundhogs, skunks, red and gray squirrels. But we also have a lot of birds up there that nobody is aware of. We've got barred owls, great horned owls, downy and pileated woodpeckers, the usual finches and chickadees and cardinals and robins. It's on the migration for indigo buntings, which are a gorgeous little bird that go down south. We have red-tailed hawks, Cooper's hawks, sharp-skinned hawks. We've got the eagle is nearby, but he doesn't live up in those woods. But if you look at the map overview of the fork of Forest and Salisbury, Croc's property is the end of this corridor, a big part of it. And it goes right down all the way to Assumption College. It's all these funky, unbuildable lots that these animals have a whole community up there. So I just thought you should know.
Who would like to go next? I will. Okay.
Hi, my name is Louis DeRosa. I live in the area of the Salisbury Street and Forest Street, around the 274 Forest Street property, or Salisbury property, the tavern. I have been living there since 2007. First of all, I don't want to be graphic, but I can tell you the number of accidents that I've seen, either motorcycles that got hit by a car, crashed in front of my house, hit the pole, and I talked to the police officer, and he said to me, "Oh, he's all done. Look at his skull. It's cracked in half." The father came up the street when he was notified in a minivan, turns around, parks on the side of Salisbury Street where there are no sidewalks. He gets hit by a car on Salisbury Street and gets his leg broken. Didn't even get to see his son. He was taken by ambulance along with his son. Now, I understand that people have the right to do what they want with their property, but you have to have certain limits. When I bought this property, I was told, you're buying the last Mecca that exists in Worcester. This area here is beautiful. We have all these historical homes. We've got this beautiful park. It's quiet, it's peaceful. Now, all of a sudden, what happens in Holden? Holden builds all these condo units along Main Street. And the traffic on Forest Street became twofold. Now you could no longer take a left onto Salisbury Street, or if you're on Salisbury Street, you couldn't take a left onto Forest Street. So what did the residents do? I no longer take a left on Salisbury Street. I back out of my driveway, go down the street, and I take a right on Otsego Road. Now, I'm inconveniencing those neighbors now when they're coming in and out of their driveway. But it gets better. Now I take a right on Monadnock Street, and I go down Sagamore Street. Now, an interesting fact has happened, is all the people coming in from Holden have realized that. And guess what they're doing now? They're taking a left on Otsego Road, the right on Monadnock Street, going down Sagamore Street. It has become a shortcut for them. Now, what happened on Monadnock Street? The city put in a speed hump. And they put up a sign saying, between 7 and 9, you cannot take a left. Well, I walk my dog around that area. And if I told you the number of cars that take a left during 7 to 9 is astronomical. People don't care. They have a point to get to, and they're going to get to somehow. It has become to a point that I now back into my driveway and come out nose first. Because the people coming down, they don't care that I'm trying to get out of my driveway. The only poetic justice that exists there is that on the corner of Salisbury and Forest, the sidewalk juts out, and once in a while somebody will leave their front tire, or they'll pop the front and rear tire, and I pick up hubcaps every other day. Okay? That's the only poetic justice when I say, aha, we got someone. Because when people come up Salisbury Street and they take that right on Forest Street, they think they're on a highway. They're not going 30 miles an hour. They're going 40 and 50 miles an hour. Now, let's push this forward. I know Katie Kroc. She's going by the name of Katie Parvin now. I know her well. I knew Barry Kroc. I knew him well. I saw him on his last trip before he went to Florida, the year before he died. I knew him very, very well. I understand it's their property. They have the right to do what they want to do with the property, but they cannot and they do not have the right to come into an existing neighborhood, change what the neighborhood looks like, possibly change the value of the properties. Who's going to reimburse the person that has been there, say, for 30, 40, 50 years, whose house is probably worth $800,000 or $1 million, and now the house is worth $400,000, $500,000? Who's going to reimburse these people for the value of someone coming in, setting up a new area, okay? So now what happens to these people? Is the city going to make good on the rest of that money? Is the developer going to make good on that, on those people when they try to sell the house and say, oh, sorry, because we've got all these homes that were built here that are no way near the value of the homes that were built there before. That was just something that I had to say, get off my chest, but I've got other things here. I'm here tonight to talk about the excessive number of the buildings that are proposed for the area. And listening to Mr. McShay as he was explaining about the snow, if you go by there now, the snow that we've had, and we've had more in the past, imagine people rent or hire a snowplow to go in there. They go into the area, they're going around the cul-de-sac. What are they going to do with that snow? Right now, what they do, I can tell you what they do. They come up Forest, they circle around Salisbury, and they leave all the snow on 262 Salisbury Street, which happens to be that big white house on the left-hand side. I have cut the berms for the people to walk on the crosswalk. Guess what? The minute these guys go by, I have to go in the back at my snow blower and do the same thing again, because I'm concerned of the people that have to cross from the side of Salisbury onto Forest Street, because now there's a berm of snow about 2-3 feet high and they can't do it. There's no access to it. I understand that all of this needs to be taken into account. I wouldn't want to be sitting in your chairs in making this decision. But I've read Cynthia Gray's letter, and I've talked to several of the neighbors, and they're quite concerned. Imagine having to blast. I've walked that area. Imagine having to blast that hill, which is ledge. What's going to happen to the homes that are nearby? I can give you a case in point. When Otsego Road was they were redoing about 3-4 years ago, I had just had the water pipe onto my property redone. The city's, not mine. Mine was brand new. The traffic going by with the heavy equipment, the trucks loaded with material, The vibrations, I could feel them in my house. One day I'm walking outside and told my wife, I said, see, it seems like there's water coming out of the curb. She goes, no, probably not. I said, yeah, and it's potable water. I called the city water department. They came up, sure enough. The new pipe that they had installed with the vibrations, they told me this, with the heavy equipment, it broke. Now imagine blasting, moving that dirt, putting in all the pipe. It's just impossible. Imagine the poor people that have been living there for 30, 40 years, and we go ahead and we allow this to go in, 17 houses. Now, why is it that the tavern has been closed for about, 18 years? Why was nothing ever done about that? It has just been there. The city needs to ask a lot of questions of the developer. Are you planning for this? Are you planning for the livelihood of these individuals? As the young lady that was here talking about how her lungs have been damaged, how air pollution is very important to her. Well, it's very important to me and to all of us. But as you get older, your lungs have to work a lot harder. If the pollution is there, you got noise pollution, you're gonna have light pollution. Before coming down here, I turned on to my wife and I said, I wish I had a tape recorder to tape all the horns while we're sitting down at our dining room table, all the horns, the cars jockeying for position, screaming at each other. This is now in the cold. Imagine in summertime. How can we ask these people for more? Again, like I said, I wouldn't want to be in the planning board seat because it's a no-win situation. It really isn't. Now, I have some concerns. While doing this research, and doing some other research, I found that at one time there was an oil spill in that property. I don't know if the city is aware of that. I don't know if it was ever cleaned. No idea. It's on the internet. I found it. Another thing is, has the city or the planning board or anybody, I understand there is an endangered species. It's called the New England North Reed grass. And it exists in 2 places in Massachusetts, in the Berkshires, in the other place, you guessed, Worcester. Has anyone looked for that? Is anyone aware of that before making these decisions? It's on the endangered species list right now in the state of Massachusetts. Okay. Last but not least, the possibility of this development going in and the checking of the values of the houses. What kind of houses are these going to be? I know the gentleman over here explained, saying, oh, this was just a prototype that we put there. But are they going to be compatible to what we own? What's the value?
Just to be clear, that's not part of this particular approval. This particular approval is just related to the division of the land and the associated roadwork. Again, it's preliminary, so this is step 1 of 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want you to know, the board, to know how we feel about our properties, how we feel around the area. You can't walk in that area. 7 to 9 and 5 to 7, forget it. The traffic is horrific. If you don't believe me, I welcome you. You can come to my house. Have a seat. I'll give you a chair, and you can sit there and count the number of cars.
I don't think there's anybody on this board who isn't familiar with that intersection.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Through the chair, really quickly, for folks joined online, we're taking comment in the room first, and then we'll move to online. If you want to raise your hand now, you're welcome to do so, but we'll get to you after folks in the room. Thanks.
Can we go 1 and then 2? Is that okay?
I actually was going to make a request. So somebody who's online, Cindy Gray, she was mentioned, she actually has to leave, but she requested, I don't know if it's okay, if she could just briefly speak. And my name's Eric Rosenthal. I live at 29 Otsego. I'm happy to speak after her, but I was wondering if we could make an exception in this case. I'm sorry.
The gentleman's requesting somebody online apparently has got another commitment that they need to go to. I don't mind, Ms. Russell, if we can, do you want to say her name again?
Cindy Gray.
Cindy Gray. You should be good to go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Cynthia Gray. I live in 21 Otsego, and I work in regulatory compliance for pharmaceutical companies, ensuring that manufacturers meet strict federal requirements, right? In my field, nothing can move forward, not even preliminary, unless there is defined testing plan and clear evidence that the required analysis will be performed. We do not rely on assumptions, and we do not approve anything without the data to support it. So my spirit, I bring that same standard of evidence-based decision-making to this process. With that, I assume the applicants were provided our formal objections, which clearly outlined the technical issues and safety concerns that must be addressed. Yet none of these required assessments have been provided, nor is there any indication in their documentation that they intend to perform them. So, I understand the board is reviewing the construction plans right now, but construction plans are not a substitute for the required safety assessments. A construction plan shows how they intend to build. The missing engineering analysis show whether they can build safely at all. Those are two very different things. And this matters because the board's decision-making process directly affects a number of residents who could be negatively impacted if these risks are not fully understood. That includes not only the geotechnical, slope stability, stormwater blasting, and vibration risks, but also the traffic impacts that increase potential for accidents on roads that are already constrained. Without a traffic study on any analysis of how this development will affect vehicle flow, sight lines, or emergency access, the board does not have that information needed to evaluate public safety. It is also important to note that the applicant appears to have provided an assessment for only one house. This is a subdivision with many homes, each with its own grading foundation conditions and potential impacts on abutting properties. A single assessment cannot be extrapolated to an entire development. Every home would require its own analysis to determine whether it can be constructed safely on its specific lot. Without that, the board is being asked to make decisions based on incomplete and non-representative information. I also understand that several city departments have raised questions and issues they want the applicant to address. Those concerns should be made available to the public and to abutting neighbors so we can understand the scope of these risks being identified. Transparency is essential when a project has the potential to affect safety and stability of existing homes. The board has stated the applicant has a right to develop these homes under Massachusetts law, specifically MGL Chapter 41, the subdivision control law. A property owner has a right to apply to develop their land, but they do not have an unconditional right to build. Chapter 41 gives the planning board both the authority and the responsibility to require safety, engineering, drainage, grading, and traffic analysis before granting approval. Approval is only permitted when the applicant demonstrates that the subdivision will not create unsafe conditions or harm abutting properties. Those requirements have not been met here. And with that in mind, if this applicant proceeds without required safety assessments and blasting, vibration, slope, instability, drainage failures, or traffic impacts cause damage to abutting homes, who's responsible for those costs? Will the applicant commit to paying those damages without pre-construction surveys, vibration monitoring, slope stability analysis, stormwater modeling, and a traffic study? The financial and physical risk is shifted entirely onto existing residents. The people who did not choose this project, but will bear the consequences if something goes wrong. Finally, I understand the board is considering approving the waivers rights. Approving waivers before underlying safety assessments are even planned removes critical protections before the board has evidence that the project can be built safely. In my regulatory world, we cannot waive testing requirements before the testing is done. Waiving comes after the data, not before it. Granting waivers is now would be premature and would expose residents to unnecessary risks. When these foundational assessments are missing, the board, I don't see how you could even make a preliminary approval. The applicant had all this time to do just some fundamental assessments, do their own research, but did not do that. So I do not care about the construction of what you plan on building. I care about what assessments you have done to ensure the safety of me and my neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Just a couple of points. To be clear, this is a preliminary assessment. The point of this process is for them to come and understand what assessments are going to be necessary before we approve anything. Waivers aren't approved today. They're asking us to give them an indication whether or not we would be willing to consider approving waivers. As it relates to the 3 waivers they're asking for, they're not really so much safety related as contextually related. I don't know if that makes sense. And last thing, the previous commenter referenced a bunch of subdivision control law, which is great. Just want to point out the point I was trying to make to folks in the public is they're here for a preliminary subdivision approval. There is a pathway to build just as many houses without a subdivision. The subdivision is the road and the lot related. They can do a process called A&R, which stands for approval not required. Divisions on this lot and wind up with the same number of buildable lots. Those lots would potentially, some of them will require site plan approval, many of them will not. That's the alternate pathway that they have available within kind of the Massachusetts rules. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Eric Rosenthal. I live at 29 Otsego Road, so I am a direct abutter to the properties that we are discussing this evening. I live there with my wife and 4 children, one of whom has respiratory conditions, and another one who has severe autism spectrum disorder. I'm a physician, so I have multiple public health concerns, specifically with the significant excavation that's going to be occurred, and that's going to cause the release of fine particles, some of which we are not aware of, that could negatively and adversely affect the community at large. We don't live on an island. We all breathe the same air, so all of the particulate that will be released will be inhaled by all of the members of the community. The other thing I wanted to speak about was, so my 7-year-old who has autism, he rides a bus every morning to school. The bus, we all are aware of the snow that is currently kind of surrounding the streets. I would encourage you not to allow this waiver of going below the minimum threshold to navigate a street with a city bus, especially with the snowbanks. That would be impossible at this point. And so I'm just using my son as an example, but this is, this is a neighborhood with children. We have a neighborhood school, several neighborhood schools. So presumably there would be children living in those houses. So from, allowing the school buses to go through into that community and to take care of children that require transportation, that would be an impossibility. The other thing is I would also encourage you not to approve the waiver of not having sidewalks on both sides of the street. It's really a quality of life. I also think it's a public safety thing as well. Having sidewalks on both sides of the streets just makes the area safer. So I would encourage you not to approve that waiver as well. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, sir.
Hello. I'm Diane Berg. I live at 10 Forest Street. I'm directly on the corner of Forest and Otsego. I've lived there for 30 years. I've raised 3 children. I love my neighborhood. I'm attached to it, but I have to say that in that time, the amount of traffic going by the front of my house has increased exponentially. When I first moved in there, I had 3 small children, including an infant, and I was quite struck by the volume of traffic at certain times of the day, not just the rush hour in the morning and the evening, but when the schools get out around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's often quite backed up. In the ensuing years, that has become so much more the case that it'll be backed up several blocks. And so this is 3, call it an hour-long period, at least, every single weekday. This is disruptive, as many of my neighbors have mentioned. It makes it unsafe to walk in the neighborhood. This is a family neighborhood. These are 3 4-bedroom houses. A lot of my neighbors have small children, like the gentleman who just spoke. Several people have addressed what is already happening with regards to using the Sagamore, Monadnock, Otsego maze as a shortcut to and from Park Avenue. These were once quiet side streets that have become so clogged at certain times of the day that speed bumps have been deemed necessary. There is a Flag Street school bus stop at the corner of Sagamore and Monadnock. There are children standing out there, at the appropriate hours every single day. The increase in traffic is already posing a danger to the children and the families in our neighborhood, people walking dogs. I'm not even going to talk about the snowbanks because that's Mother Nature, but we don't need to make things worse by adding, let's face it, realistically, 34 more cars coming in and out of driveways at that intersection. I'm very glad that Sarah Lennis addressed the wildlife situation, which is something else that concerns me. Having lived directly across the street from the lot proposed, we see a lot of wildlife just from our house. We see deer, we see foxes, we see lots of turkeys. We can be sitting on our porch in the summer and they will come right across Forest Street on a quiet day. We'll have deer in our yard. I don't want to see those animals lose their habitats. Also, I'm bound to say, I don't feel like this proposal is being made in good faith. I've lived across the street from this property, as I say, for 30 years. I lived through the year or two when the Cow Tavern was turned into a fraternity house for Assumption College students. And this was a nightmare that many of my neighbors who lived there at the time can attest to. My children were all school age. They were being kept awake all hours of the night. Many of my neighbors were constantly calling the police, and what had been the driveway to a home had become a parking lot. This was incredibly disruptive. I don't feel that the owners of this property have the best interests of the neighborhood in mind, and I feel that this project would be detrimental in every conceivable way, and I can't see any benefit to it at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
May I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't want to repeat everything that everyone has said. My name is Elsie Uffelman, and I'm a 42-year resident of Worcester. We used to have property at the corner of Nelson Place and Grove, so I'm very familiar with the character of the neighborhood. I just had a couple of questions. So that part of this, off the cul-de-sac, that looks like a boomerang, what is that for? There are no houses there.
Sorry, you do have to address your question to me. I know it feels weird, just the way the meeting order is supposed to work, but I can answer that. That is a driveway for the mansion that's on top of the hill. They have an access easement through this property that has to be maintained.
Oh, okay, so that's being integrated into this project.
Yeah, so it already exists. This is my understanding, and Ms. Russell can correct me. It already exists, but a portion of it is getting replaced by the road with the cul-de-sac on it. So they're replacing it. You can kind of see, I believe it's not the darker line, it's actually the lighter line that kind of goes up and around, is where it exists currently.
So it's already there?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so it just made me curious to know whether that potentially would be leading to more development if that mansion were to be sold. Just speculating. I don't know. And another question was, are the are the plans including clear cutting?
Yes, ma'am.
Clear cutting.
They're not, there is a plan I think Ms. Russell's looking for now that shows the extent of the work. It's not every single tree on the property, but it's substantial.
So just on that alone, I just wanted to say that, yeah, they have every right to do whatever they want with their property, but I would appeal to the owner of this property to think about responsibility. That, you know, life is not only about rights, it's about responsibility. And this is a treasured part of Worcester. It's an open space. And to develop it to this level, which is so overwhelming, really, it's overwhelming, is irresponsible. I just feel like it's not in keeping with the vision of Worcester, which is we're supposed to be a green city. And here we are taking another big parcel of land and destroying it. And I can see at least 34 cars there, maybe 60, snow blowers, lawn mowers, pesticides, herbicides being put on these beautiful green lawns. It just is appalling. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Other folks in the room? Come on up.
Hi there, Tina
Hi.
Saloti, Worcester resident. The only thing I'm going to say is obviously it's a room full of passionate people who want our green spaces to stay green, don't want that intersection as chaos, as you know. I exercise and run in that neighborhood. I've almost been hit at least twice up by the Christian Science Church, where it's the only crosswalk in that area. But as someone who bought a house in a neighborhood that was directly impacted by Holden's growth, I'm a cut through between Holden Street and 122A. When we bought the house on Lansing Ave, we had no traffic. We were so excited to I came off Elm Street. And when all of the subdivisions were built up there, it became chaos. People driving down the street at 7 a.m. to bring their kids to school, doing 40 miles an hour. Dogs being hit by cars. I mean, I have to check 3 times before I step out onto my property at 3 Lansing to walk across to 1 Lansing because of how fast people take the turns. So I think a lot of what you're hearing tonight, which is not necessarily due to the things that you are going to talk about or that you're going to work on, is that there's a passionate thing about this kind of change where there's already chaos. Secondly, the one thing I did want to bring up is that we've had a lot of infrastructure issues on Salisbury Street already with 2 major water main breaks. How is that going to be addressed? Or who's going to pay for any kind of more water pressure going through those pipes that are already ancient, that we've already had problems with? And I just see that as part of the issue with this building, other than the fact that we're going to kill a lot of animals. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? You can ask a question, but you have to come up to the microphone to answer the question. But
I am Chris McGovern, and I'm a resident of Worcester on Salisbury Street. I wasn't planning on speaking, so I apologize if I come across discombobulated, because I am. But one of the things I want to address, when we bought the house 20 years ago, Salisbury Street was 2 lanes, one going to Park Ave, one coming up from Park Ave. In the 20 years since then, 1 lane was split, so it became 3. Now it's 4 lanes of traffic in front of my house on Salisbury Street every day. I work in Sutton, which is a 30-minute commute. I have to go to work 10 minutes early, so I get to leave 10 minutes early. Because if I wait until 5 o'clock to leave, I can't pull into my driveway because people are backed up on Whitman because they can't get out on Salisbury. So I had mentioned that in a letter years ago, and they put up one of those no left-hand turn signs. Nobody enforces it. I sit in my sunroom every morning with my coffee, and cars do it consistently. There's no one checking, no one stopping. Drivers don't care. They just want to get away from that light, which is a whole nother issue at the bottom of Salisbury and Park, isn't timed right. Park Avenue gets like 3 minutes for a green light. Salisbury gets 10 seconds. I mean, you let 5 cars through. So it creates a big backup, but I know that's not what we're supposed to be talking about tonight. But the issue I just want to echo is the traffic is ridiculous. And if you lived on Salisbury Street, you'd know it's ridiculous, and it's changed exponentially in 20 years. And I can't imagine this not even creating more chaos, more traffic, more backups for the side streets and the cut-throughs, because nobody's even enforcing those no left-hand turn signs. Nobody cares. They'll do it just to ease the minds of people who complain about it, but nobody follows up. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Hebert. I live off of Salisbury Street, and I share a lot of the sentiment that's gone on. But I have a question, because I've heard you say it twice, Mr. LaValle. We're here tonight because you're preliminarily looking at this structure to the housing. But you've said a couple times that they could do it differently. You said something about 15 driveways on Shrewsbury Street. So in my mind, I'm thinking, is the construction inevitable? Because I know in my mind what I would like is for it to stay exactly as it is, and maybe for the tavern to go away and a light or some kind of control to go there. But I'm feeling after tonight that that's not going to be the outcome, that the outcome is going to be that there's going to be some houses. It's just what it's going to look like.
It's a good question, and so I'll try to answer it as honestly as I can. Lots of times, in my experience, developers come before this board and they propose something and we approve it and it never gets built. And there's a million reasons why. A lot of them are financing, things like interest rates. Some of them are personal to the developer. Maybe they get a bunch of projects approved at once and don't have the financial backing to complete them all. I don't want to comment on this applicant specifically, and I don't know whether or not they will follow through on this development should we eventually approve it. I think if you Googled some of the other properties they own in the city, there have been cases where things have gotten approved and not ultimately moved forward, including on this site. To directly address your question, though, of is it inevitable that housing will get built here? If you ignore what I just said of, hey, maybe they don't build it, the subdivision that, there's more than 3, but let's simplify it. There's 3 types of approval, things that come before this board, and subdivisions are a big, important one of them. Our role is Worcester has a ton of ordinance, pages and pages of ordinances about subdivisions, everything from how wide the streets are, sure, whether or not you can have sidewalks and where they have to be, where the streetlights are, all that stuff. We're supposed to look, and because there are so many rules, look at the exceptions to the rules, where the developer says, I can't do this because of hopefully a good reason, and decide whether or not that's an appropriate waiver. That's the purpose of this board as it relates to subdivisions. They don't have to get a subdivision here to build a bunch of houses, the same number of houses. You know, if the concern was this is 17 new buildings going in, if we don't approve this subdivision, well, they can still put 17 new homes, and it's probably, in my opinion, it's going to result in a worse development for the neighborhood should they move forward with that development. And for the folks that are talking about Salisbury Street, I would point out, just a little further up the road, a few years ago, we had a steep slope trigger. A couple different houses have gone in up there with driveways entering on Salisbury Street. I don't know who it was that was saying they've almost been hit there twice, but when I was a runner, I very nearly got hit right in front of one of those houses.
Oh, I believe it. There's a fairly new house that they just finished up after 3 years of building, and a massive tree went down right next to it.
Yeah, I mean, things do happen. So I can't say, nobody has a crystal ball, nobody can see the future. This board has a very narrow purview, and our job is really, hopefully, influence this development, given the myriad rules and regulations that we're asked to weigh in on, in such a way that it's a better development for the neighborhood than what would happen otherwise, should it get built.
Okay, thank you.
Hey there, I'm Keith Linares, 1 Germain Street. I share my neighbor's concerns about this project, and I have a question that I guess is maybe part rhetorical and part practical. With projects like this, it seems like, you know, Worcester's going through a lot of unchecked growth, a lot of unchecked development. We, the residents and the taxpayers of this city, don't seem like we get a lot back for all of this. There's houses going in all the time, subdivisions, large development projects. As others have alluded to, the infrastructure doesn't seem like it's keeping up with that. I've talked to people in the city who say that their schools are getting overcrowded. There's neighborhoods without sidewalks. People can't walk, bike safely in the city. So sort of like the rhetorical or practical question I have is, who keeps an eye on holding the city accountable for its own plans, like Vision Zero, which is supposed to make the city more walkable, less dependent on cars, allow people to safely get around, walking and biking. It seems like in order for our concerns to be heard, we have to organize and descend on every single planning board meeting or zoning board of appeals meeting that concerns our tiny little piece of the city. This is a prime piece of urban real estate, and it's basically going through a suburbanization kind of a building here. Like, why isn't the city kind of following its own plans? And who is it that's going to be holding the city accountable? Is this going to go in and then, you know, we have to go grovel to our district city councilor to have them put in a couple of speed bumps because that's what they actually have the power to dole out? Why isn't the city following a more systemic and structural approach to making the city more safe, livable, and walkable for all of us? Because I just see continued evidence that the city is undergoing massive and rampant speculation. The only people that are benefiting are the real estate speculators who wisely purchased property here 10 or 15 years ago when they saw the rising tide in Boston coming and they knew people were going to be moving out here. And it seems like those of us that want to be here for the long term, I'm not seeing a good reason to stick around in Worcester past the time when my kids are at a high school, honestly. So I just want to know, like, practically, what would you recommend as a planning board for if this does go forward, if we do see this suburban style development going into our neighborhood, what are we supposed to do about it? Who do we turn to for help? Thank you.
Great question. If you had an entire doctoral thesis worth of time, I might be able to answer that. But I'll give you a short story, which is, you probably know, I know you ran for city council, you probably know that the planning board is appointed by the city manager and approved by the city council. We're citizen volunteers. And we get sort of, the way it worked in my case is you really have to recruit for this position. If anybody's interested, this board, many other boards in the city need members, need citizens. This is this board's purpose. It has a very narrow, defined statutory purpose, but really it's a venue for a public meeting about what's going on in the city. And I've been on this board, it's coming on 8 years now. I joined specifically after the result of a national election that I didn't favor. And the point that people made was, if you're frustrated, you have to get involved. And, you know, I run a company. I don't have a ton of free time, but I could volunteer. You know, I didn't want to run for office, which you did, and I'm sure, I hope that was a rewarding experience, but I'm sure it was also very frustrating. I could volunteer for this, and I have some expertise as it relates to land use and real estate development. We need other people to come and weigh in on this, and unfortunately, being on this board for 8 years, the reality is we're just sort of overwhelmed by the amount of development that goes on in the city. You know, our typical agenda is 10 to 15 items. We've been talking about this for 90 minutes. We couldn't spend 90 minutes on every one of those items. And they all matter to people as much as they matter to you folks about this thing that's happening in your neighborhood. I'm also a resident. I've also seen developments that I like or don't like that are nearby my home. So I empathize with you. The city, it keeps growing. I mean, the reality of this site that many people have acknowledged is that somebody owns it, and going back to the founding of our country, we give a lot of rights to landowners. And in Massachusetts specifically, we have very few restrictions in terms of what they can and cannot do on their land. You know, we enforce zoning, but we can carve out exceptions to zoning. This is the most restrictive zoning in the entire city. I'm a housing advocate, so I actually think that more housing is good, more density is good, but it has to be good density and it has to be balanced with neighborhood concerns and infrastructure and things like that. I don't know how much more I want to talk about this. I think a lot of institutions and systems and thinking that was developed in the post-World War II era are kind of meeting their match right now in the modern moment. And city development, real estate, there's a lot of people with a lot of incentives to keep it the way it is. And the result of those incentives are that we're going to keep seeing stuff like this, and we're going to keep seeing kind of the big cruise ships that this board approves on a routine basis in the downtown business corridor, and that frankly benefits a lot of people in the city and it disadvantages a lot of people in the city. It's just change. I don't know what to tell you folks other than that. The best you can do is try to influence the process by coming out and having conversations, talking about what's important to your neighborhood, getting creative to the extent you can. I know many folks pointed out concerns. Equal number of folks, in addition to pointing out their concerns, said, hey, what if, I wonder if the developer thought of X, Y, or Z. That might improve things or make this a better development. That's really the best outcome that there is of a process like this. I hope that helps. Anyone else from the room like to speak? Come on up.
Hi, my name's Carol Cronin. I live off of Salisbury Street, and my question is twofold. Has there been a study done on the traffic in said area? And if so, or if not, is the developer going to pay for the entire infrastructure on the roadways?
I can answer that question. So the city does not require traffic studies below a certain threshold. And I'll tell you why. Try to explain it how I think of it. So this is 17 new homes, and I know that sounds like a lot when you live next to them. But if you were to zoom out a little bit into the broader neighborhood, there's many, many hundreds of homes, and the people driving through, many, many thousands, maybe tens of thousands of cars that drive through that intersection every day. So the question isn't, is the traffic good or bad? That's not really what a traffic study answers. It answers, will this make it noticeably worse? And it won't. Just by virtue of the fact that this is, even if everybody has 3 cars that lives in this development, it's just not enough cars to materially affect the traffic. And I know how frustrating that can be for folks to hear, because you're experiencing how bad the traffic is right now. Unfortunately, we don't put that on individual developers to fix. It's really the city. In infrastructure planning, people talk about a rotary would be a great idea there, and that might be true. I'm not a traffic engineer. We can't make them build the rotary. We can ask our city councilors and the Department of Transportation and Mobility to do the best that they can to prioritize that project and start the long process of doing it. As you may or may not be aware, like Mill Street got redesigned, now they're moving on. I can't remember if it's Pleasant that's next. They systematically move through the city and try to redesign these things to incorporate what they call complete streets. So as part of their Vision Zero plan, they have all these plans, but it takes so long to do anything that it will be a while. And unfortunately, that's true for this neighborhood regardless of this development. And to really answer your question, it just doesn't, so it would be many multiples of this would trigger a traffic study. And the traffic study would just say whether or not that development made it materially worse.
Okay. Do you know if the city has any plans to revisit that area regardless if there's a development that is going to be built for, say, traffic lights, to at least allow the people to drive through at a normal speed without cutting others off?
I'm not aware, I'm not a city employee. Ms. Russell may be aware and may not be aware, because Worcester is actually a fairly large city. We have, hundreds, maybe thousands of employees. So the department that works on that doesn't tell me.
Okay, all right. So would they, and just bringing this a little further, would the Cows Tavern be removed to expand the intersection?
That was something somebody in a letter suggested that I read today. And I mean, it sounds like a good idea to me without knowing anything about it. I know we moved the other tavern, the Stearns Tavern, kind of in the Webster Square, Main South area. They used to move buildings. That's about all I can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else in the room? Ms. Russell, do you want to facilitate anyone online?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to throw it out there that if anyone has questions or concerns, that you can reach out to the Department of Transportation and Mobility and advocate for improvements you'd like to see in your neighborhood. So they can be reached at mobility@worcesterma.gov. So those folks out there are always looking at these kinds of things. So direct your inquiries there. We're happy to facilitate, but they're just not as familiar with the improvements they're making. So we do have a couple folks joined in online. If you're called in, it's going to be *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute. Or if you're on Zoom, you can use the raise your hand feature. So first up, we have Eric Stratton, if you want to go ahead first.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Eric Stratton, I live at 353 Salisbury Street. I will try to be brief, and I appreciate this board's time and the fact that you're allowing people to speak and answering their questions. It is greatly appreciated. As others have said, I have serious concerns with regards to the impacts that this development will have on traffic, especially at the intersection of Salisbury and Forest, as well as potential impacts due to the grading and the essentially the clearing of this property. I actually came through that intersection earlier this evening coming home, and it took me more than 30 minutes to just get from Otsego to the intersection of Forest and Salisbury. So 30 minutes worth of traffic, not really due to the snowbanks, just simply due to the volume of traffic there of people trying to turn. So in the event that this subdivision is built, my deepest sympathies to the people living there. You'll get home eventually, I'm sure. The concerns I really have are this is going to increase a lot of the traffic, and the houses that seem to have driveways along Salisbury, the development of this property gives me concern. We've had a number of houses built recently along Salisbury, across from Newton Ave and nearby, that have caused some serious impacts on Salisbury, specifically with regards to traffic, noise, pollution, and it's caused a lot of problems. I know myself, we had a number of cement trucks queuing up outside of our house. while one of these houses was under construction. They're out there prior to the allowed hours for noise, basically just queued up and waiting to get started and idling their engines because they can't stop spinning a drum of wet cement. With the looks of this plan, it's a large number of houses, and while I realize they may be able to develop by right and that it may not be as desirable for us, I think it also would be less desirable for the developer in that people who could potentially buy these houses simply won't want to if it's a poorly designed neighborhood or poorly designed layout. So I do hope that the developers are going to work with the city and the residents to address some of these concerns. And that may mean reducing the number of lots that they're trying to develop. I also have concerns with relation to the tavern as well as the mansion. I realize those are not necessarily parts of this plan, but having these properties, one of which is historic and frankly is very clearly just being neglected and allowed to rot, frankly doesn't bode well in terms of as good neighbors or, really a good faith development effort. If they were looking to do that, I would hope that they would have something in this plan saying, here's their plan for that building, for that tavern, that they will be restoring it, or if they are planning to raise it, telling people what their plans are rather than simply leaving it to rot. The same goes with the mansion up at the top of the hill. There's no plan really there. It may be a different owner, but again, it gives me concern that, hey, you're building this whole development and then you're leaving this large structure up at the top of the hill to rot. I would hope that with regards to the concerns about sidewalks and the roadway width, I would urge this board to not grant those waivers or exemptions or whatever the appropriate term is. I enjoy narrow city streets probably more than most. I think it's helpful. It can add for a lot of traffic calming, helps keep people from zooming about. However, I do have concerns with regards to when people do have gatherings, when there are snow emergencies like we have currently, it can create significant impacts and cause for concern when it comes to issues of either fire or emergency vehicles. With regards to the sidewalk, we should not be giving people variances or waivers from having basic infrastructure for our city. Frankly, as part of this development, I would hope that we would urge them to add sidewalks to Salisbury Street as well. And so, again, part of that being, a good neighbor, if you're going to develop, be a good neighbor, add sidewalks so people can continue to walk and improve our infrastructure for your neighbors. So I'd hope to see that happen as well. With that, that sort of concludes my comments. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a Jim Halpin, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Jim Halpin, 30 Otsego Road. I had submitted a letter to the planning board because we are traveling this week. We knew we couldn't be there. We weren't sure we'd get a chance to speak. I won't reiterate the points I made in that letter. The two opposition points are traffic, which has been covered, and the amount of modification to the land for this subdevelopment plan is extensive, massive tree removal, and what really concerned me at that point was the increase in cut and slope fill into this plan to create level lots. Really concerns me. I already have water problems on my basement on Otsego Road. We run a sump pump. So this concerns me greatly. A specific question to the planning board about the site plan I'm looking at shows all the lots on the north side that back up to Otsego Road shows greatly increased slopes flowing down into the backyards of all the abutters. Fay, Rapp, Houlihan, Higgins, McMaster are the lots labeled there. I haven't seen anything in the plans that show any kind of mitigation of surface water runoff there, catch basins, drainage swales. So the specific question is, can the planning board require that from the developer at this stage of, it's a preliminary plan. And I also brought up in the letter that I think that approving any waivers for a minimum road size or sidewalks on only one side, to me, seems to be just an opportunity to cram more lots into the buildable land here, and I would encourage you to deny those waivers. I'll thank you, and I'll listen to your response.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Russell, I don't know the answer about the appropriate stage to condition runoff mitigation. Would it be the definitive subdivision, or would it have to be in site plan?
Through the chair, I think the definitive subdivision is really getting at mitigating stormwater as it relates to the roadway. Stormwater runoff and meeting the Massachusetts stormwater standards for the individual lots would be something through the site plan process where we'd be reviewing the extent of the impervious surface and mitigation on site for each lot. But the subdivision would be the roadway.
Okay, I hope that was clear. Basically, it's not at this stage, it's at a later stage that would come up, though it's a legitimate concern to raise, and the developer can certainly hear us raise it now, which is really the point of a preliminary subdivision plan, like what we're doing. I hope that helps.
It looks like we do have one more person joined online with their hand raised. Kim, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, hi. My name is Kim Sabrowski, and I live at the top of Beachmont Street. And I just want to say that the traffic is bad enough on Salisbury Street now, and I can't imagine how much worse it's going to be with this development. I came to the meeting late, so I apologize. I was not able to get all the information at the beginning. And my family has lived on Beachmont Street since the mid-1960s. So needless to say, I've seen a lot of changes in this area of Worcester. And I'm really upset to hear that, from hearing all these people speaking, that the land is going to be brought down in elevation to accommodate these lots. And there's going to be a lot of clear cutting of trees, and not to mention the traffic. And the old, as Mr. Stratton previously said, the old tavern that's there in the corner is basically falling apart. It's deteriorating due to neglect, and the mansion up at the top of that private drive has windows that are all completely boarded up. And I'd love to know what the appraised value is of that entire lot and what the asking price is for that entire lot. But I just would say that I really think that you really need to reconsider what is going to happen to that property. And I'm not familiar with all the waivers that were discussed because I came in late, but I really hope that you do not approve any of those waivers. And I think that everybody who's spoken out tonight against this development has some very concrete and definitive opinions on what should happen with this property, so that if it is developed, that the number of houses needs to be dramatically reduced. That's way too many houses for that property there of 17. And I agree about the real estate property values and everything else everybody has said. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else online?
I just want to check, Eric, you still have your hand up if you had any additional comments to provide. Otherwise, folks can use star 9 to raise their hand if you're called in, star 6 to unmute, or raise your hand on Zoom. I'm sorry, Eric, give you one more chance. Sorry, go ahead.
Apologies. No additional questions. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your comments. I don't see that we have anybody else online with their hand raised. I just want to make one slight correction to the concern about the intersection. We did get an update today in our memo. It's outlined in red about the intersection and improvements. We are expecting DTM to install a traffic light at that intersection. When that gets installed, I can't speak to. It obviously needs to go through a process, but it is targeted as a future update at the intersection. So hopefully that eases some concern.
I'm not sure if you heard that, but Rose is saying DTM actually does plan to install a traffic light at this intersection. We don't have a timeline on that, but that apparently, they let us know that today. All right, final call for comments. Hearing none, would the applicant like the opportunity to address anything they've heard before we kind of go to board discussion? Sorry, putting you on the spot.
No, not a problem. I certainly appreciate everybody coming out and kind of raising their concerns. I think that some of what, the chair has mentioned is true, obviously, in that, there are other ways to develop this such that I think would be worse. And I think that part of the reason why we're here is exactly what's kind of come forth here is trying to hear you guys out and understand your concerns so that we can build something that's a little bit more palatable and better for you ultimately. I tend to be more of an open book as well. I'd be happy to sit with any of you or heed your calls or whatever to kind of talk through any of the, any of the design decisions or anything that's on the paper right now as well, just so you are understanding it that much more. So I'll just leave it at that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move to board discussion now. Mr. McCormick, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I guess just to start by saying thank you to all of the members of the public who provided comment, and thank you to the chair for fielding a lot of those comments and questions. And particularly, I know this came up a lot, but highlighting that this is a by right process. The definitive subdivision approval, generally, if an applicant meets all the requirements in the city regulations, they are allowed to move forward. They're looking for a few waivers, and then also noting that they could, in an alternate scenario, be doing strictly an A&R project here, which would not be. I don't think that would result in as good a project for the city or for the abutters. I guess in terms of the waivers that were requested, just going through them, I believe there's only 3. For the roadway width and for the dead end length, I don't particularly have an issue with those two. The dead end length is only slightly longer than what is typically allowed. And the roadway width, they're requesting 24 feet wide. I live on a 24-foot wide road, and with many more cars and houses on it, and it seems to function pretty well. I would hope that the applicant could take another look at the sidewalk waiver request. I do think it would be beneficial to have sidewalks on both sides of the city or of the street. The city obviously is trying to move aggressively with the Complete Streets plan. And I think even though there wouldn't be a lot of foot traffic on such a small dead-end road, I think it's important to still be thinking about that. In terms of the common driveway, which would be a separate special permit, so not part of this subdivision application, I do think that would probably be a benefit, and I would support that. The common driveway would prevent 3 additional driveway curb cuts directly onto Salisbury Street. So I think preventing that and allowing a common driveway onto this new road would be a better outcome than having the 3 new driveways onto such a busy road. Otherwise, for the site itself, I know a lot of the abutters commented on this, but I think the 2 main ones for me would be the traffic. and the grading for the traffic. I'm not as concerned with the volume of cars that would be created from 17 new house lots. It's a pretty, I think, as the chair mentioned, a pretty small amount compared to the hundreds or thousands that would be going that already use Forest and Salisbury Street. But I think the traffic movement of that turn onto Forest Street should be looked at carefully to make sure that this isn't going to create even worse traffic conditions, especially during peak travel hours. So that would be one thing I would be looking for, as well as the pedestrian connection from this new road onto Forest Street. Additionally, I don't really know if it's reasonable to put this on the developer, but obviously a sidewalk on the north side of Salisbury Street. There isn't one there today. It seems like this would be an opportunity to at least plan for and grade for the city to install a sidewalk. So hopefully the city can work with the developer on that to make sure that's included in any future plan revisions. And then, yeah, I mean, I know we heard a lot of concerns about the grading and the loss of vegetation on the site. I do hope that the applicant can look at possibilities to reduce the amount of grading and erosion control or potential for erosion issues, and potentially reduce the amount of existing and mature vegetation that would need to be removed from the site. Otherwise, I was happy to hear that inclusionary zoning would be applicable to this project. I was unclear if that applied to subdivision projects. And yeah, finally for the Cow Tavern, it's not really within this board or this application's purview, but hopefully the applicant is hearing the calls of their neighbors, and I would say that the board and the city that they are in control of a very important historic resource, and hopefully they can take action as part of this project to make improvements and stabilize that building. So overall, this is a by right project, as was discussed. I know this is an impact for the neighborhood, and it's a large change, but it does meet if it generally meets the requirements of the subdivision rules and regulations, I would support it.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. King, any comments from you?
No, just overall, I do appreciate the abutters coming out to kind of give their feedback. I hope that this project does continue with that, and having the abutters work with the developer to push feedback, to listen to them and make sure their thoughts are heard as well. Overall, I'm okay with the first waiver, so the 24 width road and the dead end road. Ideally, we'd want sidewalks, or I would want sidewalks where we can, just to ensure the whole area is walkable. But other than that, no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Delara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think our chairman did an excellent job. He did his usual thoughtful job explaining the circumstances about the board's purview here and how the developer can essentially construct this project with an A&R plan. It's basically going to have the same number of houses and the same amount of trees cut down, the same amount of impervious surfaces built, all concerns that are expressed by the neighbors and the abutters. All of this stuff can happen as a matter of right. It's unfortunate, but under the state law, that's how it works. Me personally, I live nearby. I experience the traffic all the time. I drive through the street flooding at the base of the hill all the time. My child had a bus stop on Salisbury Street right across the street from the site, so I really do get it. The approach with the new road that's presented tonight, it seems like it's the lesser of two evils. It reduces the number of new driveways and curb cuts on Salisbury Street itself compared to the alternative A&R option, which again, the developer could do by right. So if this is the direction that this project is going to go in, I know the city staff and the planning board is going to do whatever they can to make the inevitable result as good as it can be, and to to make sure that all the building requirements and the rules that are in place to protect the abutters, that all of those will be followed in whatever subdivision plans come forward as the review process goes forward. I believe sidewalks should be installed wherever possible. And in general, I hope the developer would take into consideration all of the concerns that have been expressed here tonight, and through the correspondence that people have sent in. And I hope that the developer would consider the various potentially negative health impacts, safety impacts, traffic impacts, environmental impacts, issues related to drainage, and just overall quality of life impacts that this development could possibly have on the area. And if the developer absolutely must build housing on this land, that they might consider scaling it back in scope. And again, to take the concerns that have been expressed here seriously. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Delara. Mr. Toomey.
Again, thank you for everyone tonight. It's been a very informative, very interesting. Again, I think the chair's done a great job keeping everyone informed as to everything tonight. Rose, what's the planning board's relative 24 versus 30? Is 24 viewed as an issue, or is that something we're comfortable that that's a reasonable concession?
Through the chair, that's a standard for the roadway width, so like curb to curb, 24 feet instead of 30. We typically would leave this up for DPW or DTM to comment on, and it wasn't flagged as a concern in either of their comments. So in lieu of that, I think we would be supportive of the reduction in width, given the limited number of homes along the road.
Okay. And again, the sidewalk relative to where the catch basin is for that, again, it says a wooden guardrail. I think that needs to be a fairly substantial cyclone fence, and that if you do have a sidewalk there and you have young kids, that just is a very dangerous spot. And again, I see that as, you know, my 12-year-old myself still looking, gee, that'd be a fun place to go down and play in and do stuff in. And just to be able to keep people from being in that area safe is just the safety factor. The other thing I looked at that I think would be a great gesture to the neighborhood is if you can add sidewalks along Salisbury Street. I don't know how that would impact those lots along that the north side of Salisbury Street, but the ability to be able to add sidewalks there, I think would add a lot of goodwill to the neighborhood. It would only go possibly so far beyond the property, but again, it still is would be an improvement on what's there right now. And again, the length of the 550 versus 556, I'm not sure where the number 500 comes from, but I don't see 556 being an issue relative to being an obstacle.
Thank you, Mr. Toomey. Okay, for myself, maybe I should start by saying, for the folks in the public, one thing we didn't mention tonight, I said there's a lot of regulations and rules, and we're actually very lucky on this board that we have a very dedicated, very talented planning staff in the city of Worcester who reviews these plans extensively for compliance with those rules. So that's a little bit Ms. Russell, it's also Michelle Smith. There's many other folks in that group, and then there's many other departments in the city that touch it as well. So people mentioned specifically the Department of Transportation and Mobility, also DPW. They're reviewing for different components of this related to the safety. So that's been going on for a number of weeks. In conversing with them about that a little bit earlier today, in the preliminary nature of this plan versus what will eventually become a definitive site plan should the applicant move forward, the concern that city staff has that I want to make sure I convey to the applicant is that there are a number of things that, because this is preliminary, we don't know yet. Some of the abutters commented on this publicly, you haven't checked X, Y, and Z. I know you're aware of that. City staff has flagged that. That's noted extensively in the conditions in the memo, different things that we want to see. And certainly, speaking for myself, but I suspect for my colleagues on the board, we would expect those conditions, particularly as they're requesting additional information or clarification or detail, to be addressed when you come back. And I'm sure that you're aware of that, but I wanted to call that out for the abutters on the record. As it relates to the waivers, I agree. I don't really think the difference between 500 and 556 feet here is going to materially change anything, and it probably does make it a little bit easier in terms of the overall development cohesion to have the cul-de-sac situated where it is. My understanding is they would remove the landscaping island from the middle of it to comply with the 500-foot limit, which I think would be a net negative. I also think, though it's not contemplated here, but I just want to note this because the driveway that extends kind of from 8 o'clock or so on the cul-de-sac is a common driveway with 4 houses. I think that's actually a really good idea to reduce curb cuts onto Salisbury Street. I would love to see it have a sidewalk on one side. I don't know if it does or not. I don't believe it does. And I don't know if we can condition that as a driveway, but it will need to come back for a special permit, so that's something we'll probably request. I think Mr. Toomey's suggestion, I have no idea the feasibility, it might have been Mr. McCormick, but I have no idea the feasibility of adding a sidewalk to Salisbury Street, but that would be tremendous. And that would turn at least my kind of hesitant, yeah, we're probably going to, if you meet all the conditions, approve this and grant the waivers, to enthusiastic support. Because that area of the city is in desperate need of pedestrian infrastructure. There was, right when I started on this board, somebody was killed a little bit further up Salisbury Street in a pedestrian fatality. It's not uncommon in that area. And I think that concludes my comments. So I support the waivers. I would want to see sidewalks on both sides of the street. I could be persuaded by Mr. Toomey's comment about the fence, because we don't want to make a worse condition. And it is a very steep hill there. So unless there's any further board discussion, I think we're ready for a preliminary or a motion to approve or not approve the preliminary.
Through the chair, really quickly before we move on, we have someone with their hand raised online. We've moved on from public comment. You don't have to take it. I just wanted to let you know if you would like to hear it.
I do think we've heard sufficient public comment tonight, and it's our policy not to go backwards. So I do apologize for that person. However, they'll have the opportunity to comment when we have a more fully developed plan at some point in the future.
Okay, with that, I would make a motion to approve the preliminary subdivision plan for 0, 274, and 300 Salisbury Street, subject to staff recommended conditions on pages 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the staff memo. And I think that covers it.
Second.
On the motion, Mr. McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Delera,
Yes.
Mr. Toomey?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Wish you the best of luck as you continue to develop the plans. Thanks, everybody. Where are we? Moving on to other business A&Rs.
Through the chair, we have 4 A&Rs properly before you on the board, and I'll be brief. And for any folks in the room, feel free to reach out to our office tomorrow with any questions. Our contact info is on the top of the agenda, so feel free to give us a call, send an email if you have any follow-up questions. So first A&R up before the board tonight is 24 Sherbrooke Avenue in Lakeview Street. This A&R plan is to reflect a property conveyance from 1980 where a A&R plan was not recorded at the time. So the property has actually already been conveyed. This property is the one in the middle, so it's two non-buildable lots known as Lot A1 to the north and Lot A2 to the south. Neither of them have sufficient frontage, but they're not meant to be held individually, but to be held Lot A1 with Lot 2, the two northern ones, and then Lot A2 to the south with Lot 1 to the south. So it's just to correct the record on an earlier unrecorded A&R plan. After that, we have 14 Emery Street and La Chapelle Street. This is an existing single lot today. We're in the RL7 zoning district. The proposal is a single-family attached style dwelling, which requires 25 feet of frontage along an improved right-of-way. Emery Street's a public street up to typical standards. La Chapelle is a unimproved, in this section at least, private street, but it is on the official map. So all lots 1 through 3 have sufficient frontage in the RL7 on Emery Street. They're not using La Chapelle for frontage. 132 Moreland Street's not properly before the board. A&R 4F is 5 Forest Hill Drive, which is a public street. To the north, to the south is Moreland Street. It's also a public street. We're in the RS7 zoning district here, which requires a minimum of 65 feet of frontage. Both lots have frontage on both streets and both in excess of 65 feet, the minimum required. And next up we have 55 Pecasset Avenue. This is in one lot today. It's 55 Pecasset, which is a public street up to typical city standards. The minimum frontage is 65 feet. Both lot 1 and 2 have in excess of the minimum required frontage. And last up here, we have 93 Elton Street. This is one lot today with, it's been constructed 3 units, single-family attached townhouse-style units. Each requires 25 feet of frontage, which all 3 lots have. I will just make note, Elton Street is public, 330 feet east of Boston Avenue to where it becomes unimproved, not on the official map. So you can see the portion denoted with a dotted line. That is not part of the street, and they are not relying on any of that for frontage for that lot 3. So they have in excess of frontage on the public street to the left of that line. So those are the 4 A&Rs properly before the board tonight. Sorry, 5 A&Rs.
Is there a motion to endorse?
I would make the motion to endorse.
Second?
On the motion, Mr. McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Delera,
Yes.
Mr. Toomey?
Yes.
I vote yes. That motion passes 4-0. No communication items tonight. Are we talking about CMRPC?
I think we can hold that to the next meeting. And we do have minutes in the drive if the board's ready to vote.
Awesome. So we'll hold the discussion on CMRPC. There is one set of minutes from January 7th. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
To approve the January 7 minutes.
Second?
On the motion, Mr. McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Delera,
Yes.
Mr. Toomey?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. 5-0, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank